Mm.
And then within the camp, one of my fondest memories is just my sister and I just exploring, and there were these little plants, the mimosa plants that you touch and they shrink to your touch, and that was so neat to us. And then my family befriended other families there, and it's just amazing in terms of how kind people you've never met are. And they kind of took us in, and the adults would have their times where they would sit and talk and I'm sure plan, or maybe even discuss what they thought they were going to go to. I mean, I can't imagine just getting on and just having to trust your path without knowing exactly what you're going to. And then there was this one man who, in Vietnam, as a show of respect, you call anyone who's older either uncle or aunt, and there are different. Go Ju Ba, depending on their age level, or Ông Ba, if they're older. And so we called him Ju, and he helped us capture fireflies, to pass time. And so that was exciting for us. And then he was a smoker, and he made little flowers for us out of the silver lining of the cigarette boxes. Cool. It was so neat. Years later, when we met him again in the United States, when I asked him to do that for us again. So it was just a nice little loop, closing the loop when we were over in the States. And so that was one of the more touching moments later on. But going back to Guam, from Guam, we ended up in Connecticut. We were separated from the rest of our family. We were sponsored over by a wonderful Filipino woman through her church. I don't know what denomination. I think it was Catholic. And she took care of us, and it seemed like maybe months, but again, the time frame was just so scattered. She took us into her home. She provided us with amenities that, now that we're Americans living here, it wasn't very much, but boy, it just seemed so wonderful. There was a black and white TV, and that was such a luxury, and I just remember seeing Bewitched for the first time, just like in awe. And then I had mentioned the scrubbing bowl, I had no idea what the scrubbing bowl was. And it was in a commercial, and I asked my mom, of course, we didn't speak English, so she didn't know either. And I asked, well, was it a squid? Was it an baby octopus? We had no idea, and of course I'd find out for years later. And then another memory after that was when she took us to the church to have us blessed. And our family was Buddhist, but it was still significant to me that she did that. And so I just remember the beautiful steps leading up to the church, and it was just awe-striking because it's just so beautiful, and I'd never seen anything like it. And like stained glass, and everything was so vibrant in terms of, at least of the glass. And the priest was so nice, and I just remember him having a bag of what looked like chips, but of course I know now they're communion wafers. And I just remember thinking, "Mẹ con đói," because I'm hungry, But of course we couldn't because we weren't baptized. And I just remember how kind he looked, and the robes were so different from what we had known, and not knowing what he was saying, but trusting that he was good. And then another memory was when we traveled on the plane for the first time. Well, I'm sure we were on a plane some other time, but I don't remember that part of it. I just remember being on a plane to go to what a reunion that was. And we were staying with them in an apartment. And then we went from there. My mom, somehow through either Vietnamese organizations or just organizations that started naturally coming about with refugees, she met my stepdad. And my mom was separated from my father for a long time. And the man who is now my stepdad, took care of us. And he helped her. And, I just remember there was part of me as a child that felt such resentment, and such, not that I didn't like him, but I just felt such resentment because I still remembered my father. I remember his boots. I remember sitting in his lap. I remember his stories. I remembered his voice. And so it was a really hard time for me to reconcile the fact that we were away from my father. But at the same time, I had these conflicting feelings because I really appreciated what he was doing for us. And at some point, we moved to San Jose. And in San Jose, we had a 2-bedroom apartment. And my stepdad stayed in one apartment, or actually it was an adjoining apartment. I think it was an adjoining apartment. I'm not quite sure how that worked out. But so we were in one apartment, and he was in another, and he continued to help my mom and take care of us. And it was an interesting time because, again, as an adult, I can look back, and you really can't judge because my mom was here by herself. She's taking care of my sister. She's taking care of me, and she was pregnant at the time. So it was just an interesting thing. Where now, as an adult, I understand much more than I did when I was a child, and you have to, you forgive the situation. It's not like I guess there was a little bit of anger, because I just felt like there was a betrayal, but again, how can you really judge? My father came over in 1985, and as we are becoming, or as we became adults, my father felt more comfortable with filling in the blanks. And he actually was in a prison camp for a few years, I believe. And again, he only fills in what he feels that we can handle. And, a little bit more each year. And he was talking about how he told me, just actually a few summers ago, about how it was such a miserable time, but there were still some really wonderful, just beautiful moments in terms of humanity. The farmers that buried bananas in the mud, as he and the other prisoners were working in the field so that they can find them and then have that extra bit, and just imagining what a banana, a fruit, would be in terms of a treat, and then he talked about one time where, he was tied to a tree, and he mentioned how they were trying to break me, and just, I don't know what the circumstances were and what he got in trouble for, but he was so depressed. And then he was talking about how he was so depressed, it was the depths of his depression, and he just looked up and he saw the trees or the palms, just bending in the wind, and he just thought how beautiful, if there's that beauty in this world, he really had to keep going. And that's so profound to me. And that, I think, came from his Buddhist faith, And so, I apologize.
Oh, no,